Hi, I'm Federico from Wave Studio, and today we're creating the amazing metalcore synthwave track from Magnolia Park-Chasing Shadows. Alright, so the song was originally produced and mixed by Andrew Wade, which is a legend amongst modern metal production, and I wanted to do this song because first of all, I really like it, really like the band, but most importantly, I really think it's a masterclass on how to blend more poppy synthwave elements with a modern, big metal rock production. And right now, this more 80s, very dreamy type of production is very trendy in pop, with artists like The Weeknd or Joe will take inspiration from that, and the more popular bands are always taking inspiration from more popular genres like this, and this is no exception. So first of all, I wanted to start with what I think is really what makes this song great, and is the synths and the production drums. So let's hop right into it. So let's take a listen of the last part of the chorus coming into the main riff, coming into the verse. So as you can hear, very modern, very big, very dreamy. That's what I was going for. And just before I show you this stuff, just wanted to say I'm not 100% sure on all those elements I added, and maybe there are more elements I didn't hear. But this is just to recreate the most important elements to show you how a modern metal production is actually made, and also added a little bit of my own touch. So starting with the main riff, which is actually the first part of the song, we have this lead synth. And it's a patch I found in Serum with a lot of reverb, a lot of compression, delay, very open, a lot of sustain. And I'm just accentuating those characteristics with the processing I'm adding after. So just an EQ, polishing some high mids, is just to make it less dynamic, and also bringing out some of the tails, just controlling some stuff, adding some saturation, low and high passing, and some chorus that is also automated on the post-chorus of the second chorus. So let's hear it. Which, as you can hear, is wider compared to this. It's also a bit louder. Then during all the parts with our guitars, we also have this synth guitar and bass synth guitar, and they sound like this. Just the synth guitar, just the bass synth, and they are there just to reinforce the guitars and the bass and to make them bigger, more modern, and also to gain some headroom, to be honest. So the guitar is just a really simple patch I created in Serum. Then we have some distortion, some EQ, and a S1 imager just to make it wider. And on the bass synth is an Omnisphere patch. This is the patch. And then I added just some EQ to make it warmer and control it with an L2. And also some sidechaining from the kick. Let's hear it. In context. And as I've said, they also play in the chorus and in the bridges. Let's actually hear without them, because they make a big difference. With them on. They're actually a big part of the guitars. They're very important for this modern metal production. And finally, we also have this stutter pad. Very dreamy, a lot of highs. Then we have this super saw, just to reinforce the chords. Very simple super saw. And also when it repeats after the first chorus, we also have this air pad that is playing also in the chorus. Just wanted to add some shine on top, you know. Then moving on to the chorus, which is pretty similar with the synths that are there. We just have this chorus lead on top. It's actually more of a pluck sound. Almost a piano with a lot of reverb, and also this gliding synth. And those are all the synths for the chorus. Let's hear them all together. And then this part comes in, which is kind of a post-chorus. During that part, we have this pulsing pad that comes in, and it sounds like this. Which is just a pretty dark pad with an LFO on top with shaper box. And that's because I wanted to add more rhythm to that part. Let's hear it in context. And then the main riff comes in again. And on that part I actually have the guitars and drums automated up. So if you're hearing a boost there, that's why. Moving on to the intro, we just have this pad that is also playing in the bridge, in the dropout. And it's very quiet, just adding some ambience to the intro guitar that we're gonna listen right now. That's just the pad. And let's go to the intro guitar. Which is actually an acoustic I recorded and added a lot of effects on top. So this is how it sounds raw. Very basic acoustic sound. First in the chain we have this radiator, making it a bit lo-fi. Then a compressor. Then we're bringing some attack back. Then an EQ, boosting some boxy stuff that I wanted in the sound, and removing this frequency I didn't like. Then an automated EQ, doing a sweep. And it's actually closing in. Then some saturation, and also removing some presence and treble. Effect rack, doing a room thing. And finally microshift and vinyl. Just making it a bit more 80s, you know, because that's what we're going for. So let's go back to the synths and let's check the verse. So first of all, we have this Reese bass, very simple, very basic Reese bass. And actually with this song, there's not a lot of very interesting stuff, but it's all so well done. Really like this simpler approach that it makes this huge sound. So this is how the Reese bass sounds. Didn't do a lot, just cutting some low mids, I find it boxy, controlling it a bit with L2, and sidechaining to the verse kick, and then the pre-chorus kick. And let's move to this ARP verse that I really like. Spend a lot of time on it because it has a lot of automation. It's very dynamic. Let's check it out. You can see some automation there. We also have some EQ automation during the song. We also have this panman, making it a bit more dynamic in the stereo field. Then moving on, we have this pad verse. A bit dark, because it's a verse. And then in the second half of the verse, and also on all the second verse, we have this wobble bass that adds some rhythm. And all together they sound like this. In the second verse though, we have some new elements, like this bass zimmer that sounds like this. Very cinematic, and also this siren. Just a sound I found, but you can create it very easily by taking a pad and distorting it with a reverb before the saturation. Let's hear them in context. And finally we also have this brass that comes just in the second verse, on the second part. It's an Omnisphere patch I found, this is the patch, and then some Pro MB controlling some lows. Renaissance X to control it even more. Doing the heavy lifting, then some saturation, and finally some EQ, adding some highs and removing some sub. And I think it's actually very important to introduce some new elements when there's a part that already came in before. And of course it's meant to be repetitive, so it can stuck in your head, so every time it comes in you don't want it to be too different. But if it's a verse, it's good to add some new things, some more movement, maybe some more effects on the vocals. And I know this is just an instrumental, but still very important to add some little things to make the part still feel fresh and make the song evolve. And then we have the pre-chorus, which is actually just the Reese bass and the pad playing together. At this point, I would like to move to the production drums and then check out the dropout bridge. So this is how they sound. So first of all, we have this kick verse, sounds like this, which is a combination of 3 kicks, a more EDM kick, a line kick, and a 707 kick. This is how they sound by themselves. And we also have this stomp just on the one. Then the snares are also made out of 3 snares, a more EDM snare, a more natural snare, and a more smacky one. So this is how the EDM snare sounds. Then we have this snare too. And then we have this smacky snare. And finally we have this hi-hat. Very basic trap hi-hat. I just added some micro shift on top to make it more like this again. Let's hear them in context. And then we have this gated perk, which is a very 80s thing, and this is how it sounds. So it's actually a tom and a snare playing together, both gated. This is how the tom sounds, and this is how the snare sounds. Again together. We just have some cleaning, it's pretty scooped, then some transify, because I was missing some high attack, some saturation, an L2 to control the overall attack, and then some reverb and a gate to make it tighter. Then moving on to the pre-chorus. So this is how it sounds. So here we have darker drums. The kicks are made of 2 kicks. This is how they sound. The first is more of an 808 kick, very dark. And then we have this kick pre-long, which is to add some sustain and also some dimension. It's also very distorted. Then moving on to the snares. It's actually claps and snares together this time. We have this stadium clap. Then we have this clap high pre, with a lot of reverb. Then we have this perk snare, just to add a transient on top. Then we have these damage perks, which are actually very important. They give a lot of movement. Let's hear them by themselves. Kind of a tribal vibe here. Let's hear actually with them and then without them, and you'll hear how much they're doing. without them. Much more static, not very interesting. Let's add them back. And finally we have this reverse hat. Just a hat I reversed and added some Valhalla room on top. So let's hear the pre-chorus coming into the chorus. And in the chorus, we actually have this tambo to add some movement. Sounds like this. Nothing special, just added some saturation, an EQ, suit, removing some gnarly stuff, and an L2 to control it more. And actually I like L2 more than L1 for these kind of things, because I think L1 is actually better sounding because it keeps more of the transient, but when I want the transient to actually be gone and have a more sustained kind of sound, I always go for L2. Then, before moving on to the dropout bridge, let's check out the intro, when we have the same pre-chorus drums, but with a sweep on top. So as you can see, I have not only the volume automated, but also this one knob filter by Waves. Very simple trick to make your intros more interesting. Then let's move on to the actual natural drums, which sound like this. So first of all, let's check the actual libraries. And it's Modern and Massive for the shells, and also this ride symbol, and Invasion for all the other symbols. I have the drums rooted out in Ableton, like this. Let's start with the actual bass compressor, which is very important, and it's the Andrew Wade BG drums from JST. And let's hear without it and then with it on. So as you could hear, when I add the compressor, the drums become much punchier, they have more sustain, they're bigger, they're just better sounding. And it's important to notice the mix is actually at 42% and is not all the way on, because it will sound a bit crazier. Let's hear it with it on 100%. Just too much. And you also have to consider this is not a very slamming song, it's a very poppy track. So let's back it off. Punch at 71%, classic at 61%. We also have some saturation, no transient shaper, no EQ. So let's hear the drums without samples. And with the samples on. They do a lot of the heavy lifting. And that's because I wanted to treat these drums like they were actually recorded. And when you go for this kind of sound with recorded drums, you're gonna put samples on top. But I wanted to keep some of that realistic feel in the drums still. So this is how the kick sounds. And it's made of the natural kick plus 3 samples. This is how they sound by themselves. Let's hear the first, the second, and then the third. So as you can hear, they all have a different purpose. And on the bass, we just have some EQ and a bit of compression. Then moving on to the snare, this is how it sounds. We also have some bleed from the kick and the toms. Again, let's hear the samples by themselves, one by one. And that final snare, which is called Snare Extra, was added in a late stage of the mix, and it was added because I was missing some of that more EDM sound. And as you can hear, it's very cut out, because I just wanted the attack. So let's hear actually that snare plus the other snares. And the snare bus, which is all the snare except the snare extra, we have some EQ, scooping mids, some saturation, and some more saturation but more of a tape vibe. This is also to clip some of the transient. Then we have these two snare rooms. This is how they sound by themselves. More of a tight room vibe. And then we have a longer room, which, as you can hear and see, I have some reverb added. Then we have the toms. The toms are actually without samples, they're the natural ones. Then we have this CLA mix-up thing, carrying some mids around 1K. Then we have Transify, adding some attack on high and high mids. An EQ, scooping around 2K. Pro and B to control some lows when there are multiple toms sampling. And finally some saturation to make them bigger. Then we have the shells overheads. Cymbals. And those cymbals are not very natural sounding, but that's what I was going for, because I wanted something that was always on top of the mix, not very dynamic, just to add some shine. So first of all, we have this EQ, removing some boxy stuff. Then we have a pull tech, adding a lot of highs, around 16K. That everything I was talking about. Then we have soot, removing some harsh frequencies, because this is a very polished kind of sound. Then we have some compression, with a mix around 70%. Then we have revival, adding some shimmer, some saturation, an EQ that I probably made during the mixing stage, and Pro B at 20% to control some buildups. Then we have the hi-hat, just an EQ. And then we have the ride, which is actually a cymbal ride, and it comes just on the final chorus. Then no effect cymbals. Let's move to the room mono. This is how it sounds. This is just shells, and the main takeaway is just removing some lows. Then we have this room close. Driving it a bit and also compressing a bit with the glue with this tape plugin. And finally we have the room far. This is just to make the room sound bigger than it actually is. And as you can see, there's more kick in this room. Alright, let's move to the bass. This is how it sounds. Dingwall kind of sound from Dream Bass 1 on the crunchy channel. Then we have just some EQ, removing a lot of 2K, Pro and B to control the frequencies, especially the lows. Because with this kind of mixes you want the lows very pinned down. And I would actually do more, but this is not a mixing video, so I wanted to keep it very simple. Then we have this EQ that is automated on the main riff to give the bass more mids. So let's hear it and actually watch the EQ move. Making the bass grinder on that part and making it stand out more. Then we have some more EQ, polishing stuff, an L1 to control it, and finally soot to sidechain it to the kick. Then let's move to the guitars. This is how they sound by themselves. So first of all, we have these main guitars. So I recorded these guitars with my Schecter Pro C7, and it had the strings a bit dead, so I had to add some attack, some highs on my preamp that I recorded it with, so keep that in mind. And we also have some more EQ before the amp, also adding more attack, removing some of this boxy stuff I didn't like in my pickups. Then we have Archetype Gojira, just for this pedal, and this automated just on the main riff. Let's hear it. Same thing as the bass to make it stand out more, give it more means, because in that part there are no vocals, so we can make the instrumental breathe more. Moving on to the actual amp and cabinet, we have the Josh Middleton pack with the AV2 Stealth 2 preset, so classic 5150 sound with a modern voicing, and finally some EQ. Looks a bit crazy, but it is what it is. Then moving on to the octave guitars, this is how they sound by themselves. So first in the chain we have a pitch shifter, making it an octave down. Then we have this EQ, adding some attack. Then we have ST Elton Hub with Josh Middleton pack again, but this time the dual rec preset, because I wanted a more scooped sound. And finally some EQ, mainly to remove some of these low mids that were building up a lot. And also an L1 to control it a bit. They're just to support the main guitar, so didn't want them to be too crazy. Then we have these extra guitars, just on the high notes. Just wanted to make them stand out more. And on a rhythm guitar bass, we have some more EQ, not doing a lot. Some Pro MB, controlling the lows. Very subtle. Some EQ, adding some of that genty thing, and a Rex to give some movement to the guitars. And it also adds that attack, that very tsk thing that you hear when the guitar stops and then comes back again. Just hear very closely. It gives it that tooth. And finally we have this lead guitar that comes just in the second pre-chorus, and it sounds like this. Very in the back, and this time we have Archetype Nolly, another 5150 with some reverb and delay, and an EQ, very simple stuff, just high passing and low passing. Let's hear it in the mix. Alright, let's move to the effects. I'm not going to go through all the effects, because as you can see, there are a lot. But let's hear just the more important ones, because most of them are just some impacts, some risers, some subdrops, stuff like that. So I can show you how they sound all together, for example on the drop. Let's hear it. And just a combination of various impacts and risers, as I've said. Just keep in mind, in the very beginning of the song we have this thing. Just a kick and a noisy impact. An effect that I think is very important, it is this brum that sounds like this. Let's hear it in context. Makes the drop much more cinematic in my opinion. And also in the original, you can hear just before the first chorus, there's this very quiet sub drop. That's a really interesting thing that you don't hear very often in songs like this. Then let's move to the dropout that we still haven't checked out. And since we are talking about effects, let's start with them. So this is how it starts. With this big boom and some ambient things. They're very quiet. Let me make them louder for you. Some waterfall things. I don't know if it's actually in the original, but I like this stuff, so I just added it by myself. So let's hear it in context. Okay, so with this part, we introduce some new sounds. We have this pad bridge that sounds like this. Kind of watery sound. Then we have this keys. And playing less notes and more of a dry sound. Then we have these stops coming in. And it's actually a combination of two sounds. We have this one and this other one, which is the main one actually. And then in the second half of this part, we have some sounds that we already use, like this stutter pad, adding a lot of movement, the pulsing pad, with some volume automation, and the Riz and the harp. I really love how they interact between each other, such a cool part. And during the second part of the dropout, we also introduced these glitch hats that sound like this. Just adding some textures, and I've created them by taking a little sample of this crash, then some pan-man on random, some EQ, some saturation on warm tape, a transient shaper to remove some attack and make it more ambient. Then we have this strange thing in Saturn, is a preset I found, and another Saturn preset. And then we go into the final chorus, which is actually an halftime chorus. We introduce this noise harp. And then back into the second part of the chorus. And to close the production run through, let's check out these effects that are just in the outro, and they sound like this. Just some bit crash elements, and this first one, it's just me running the harp synth into a bit crusher. And then we have this bit crusher riser from Cymatics, and then another Cymatics thing, just a noise impact with some bit crash on it. So those are all the elements. It's just the OG song that obviously I can play, but we can check out the master. And we have these virtual tape machines doing some saturation, adding some highs with this EQ. Then we have a bass compressor. It's actually very important. Let's hear with it and then without it. As you can hear, it makes the mix much tighter, sounds like a finished song. Then we have some EQ, adding some shine from 12K and up, and also removing a little bit of boxy stuff. Then some more saturation, also removing some lows because this plugin adds lows that I didn't need. Then we have a little bit of EQ, removing just some muddy stuff. And then we have 2 clips in a row, and it's just to distort the mix less. And with this approach, I can actually push the mix more. Let's see how much it's doing. And also keep in mind this hard clipping, so no transients. We don't want transients. This is a modern mix, so the first one is just to clip some of the excessive transients out of the drums, and the second one is actually to push the mix louder. Then we have inflator, adding a bit of volume. And finally we have Pro L2 as our final limiter. So this is around -6 LUFS. As I've said, it's not actually a mixing video, so I'm happy with that. And finally, we just have a spectrum analyzer that is turned off. This is just for reference, and this is for streaming. And that's it. I hope you found something useful, maybe some inspiration. If you have some questions, please drop them below. I respond as soon as possible. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon.